Thank you very much. Developmental Services Ontario. So I'm going to share some information about Developmental Services Ontario and what happens when people that most of you work with turn 18 and enter into adult services. So Developmental Services Ontario was implemented in July 1st, 2011 by the Ministry of Community and Social Services. There has never in history had been a consistent process across the province of Ontario as far as accessing adult services until July 1st, 2011. So everybody prior to July 1st, 2011 that were receiving adult services in the province were either grandparented or data migrated into the database. So they didn't have to go through this process to get or to continue to receive the services and supports that they were already receiving. The reason why the ministry went this route is because supports weren't being accessed in a fair or equitable way across the province. One of the good things about going through Developmental Services Ontario, there's, as it says up there, there's 9 regions across the province. If somebody moves from one end of the province to another, their file goes with them. So they don't have to sit down and go through the process and retell their story again to another professional in their life. So lots of provincial consistencies, and we all have the same name, we all have the same logo, the same color scheme, and we use the same tagline that we're your access point for adult developmental services. So within the Southwest region, we cover 10 counties in the Southwest region. We have 5 satellite offices, one in Stratford, one in Windsor, Sarnia, Owen Sound, and in London. London is kind of like our head office. We have 20 assessors that work across the Southwest region, 2 intake coordinators, 2 admin staff, and 2 managers. So we have two key functions that of Developmental Services Ontario, and these functions are described in the Supports and Services to Promote Social Inclusion of Persons with Developmental Disabilities Act, so the 2008 Act. So the policy directives for application entities under the authority of services and supports to promote the social inclusion of persons with Developmental Disabilities Act. So our 4 key functions of the DSO agencies. So we are provision of information, we confirm eligibility, we assess support needs, and we help people link to services and supports within their community that they wish to live in. Provision of information, we do it in many different capacities. We're in person, over the phone, by email, through our website, information bulletins, and lots of community presentations. Confirming eligibility. So this is the very first step of the process of accessing services. So confirmation of eligibility for ministry-funded adult developmental services and support. So again, this is part of the Policy Directive 2.0. And the purpose of this policy is to outline the procedure used by application entities like the DSO to confirm whether an application or an applicant is eligible for MCSS-funded adult services. So the person must have a developmental disability in accordance with the Act and regulations. The person must be at least 18 years of age, be a resident of Ontario, a Canadian citizen, landed immigrant status, or permission to stay in Canada by Citizenship and Immigration Canada. So confirmation of the developmental disability. So the required documentation. So again, this is all outlined within the Policy Directive 2.0. A psychological assessment or report signed by a psychologist or psychological associate registered with the College of Psychologists of Ontario or equivalent body in another province. This states that the individual has a developmental disability in accordance with the Act and the regulation. one of the things that I wanted to share with you is in the Policy Directive 2.0, basically the definition under the Act and regulation is where a person has a developmental disability if the person has prescribed significant limitations in cognitive functioning and adaptive functioning, and those limitations have either originated before the person reaches 18 years of age, are likely to be lifelong in nature, and affect major areas of life activities such as personal care, language skills, learning abilities, capacity to live independently as an adult, or in any other prescribed activity. So the report has to outline, obviously, under the adaptive and cognitive functioning, the person who has an overall score of 2 standard deviations below the mean, plus or minus standard error measurement on a standardized intelligence test, or the person has a score of 2 standard deviations below the mean in 2 or more subscales on a standardized intelligence test, and the person has a history of requiring support, and or on the basis of a clinical determination by a psychologist or a psychological associate, the person must demonstrate significant limitations in cognitive functioning, and the person has a history of requiring support in order to do the daily functions. So what happens once eligibility is confirmed and determined? What's going to happen is the application entity will use the application package, which is provincially consistent. It's a consistent method to access the support needs of the applicants that are eligible for ministry-funded adult services. The application package consists of the ADSS, which is the application of development services and supports, and as well as the supports intensity scale, which is known as the SIS. So applying for developmental services and supports, once the DSO agency has confirmed that a person is eligible for the developmental services and supports, it's time to meet then with the person accessing services and their families to go through the application process. So they go through our intake coordinator, and her name's Mary Regan. She's the intake team support. Mary collects basic information from the applicant and their representative. The application then is assigned to an assessor. And at that point, well, the assessor, Service Navigator, and then the process begins. And I just wanted to note that once an assessor is assigned to a person and their family, it's not like it's an ongoing relationship between the two. Like it's the family or the assessor and Service Navigator is there to help families throughout the whole process as well as after the application is completed. So preparing for your meetings. So an assessor is assigned to the person, like I had mentioned. They'll set up a time and a location to meet with the family. There's going to be at least 2 meetings. And it's important it's non-negotiable that the person, the individual will be part of the application process. It's also important that we need confirmation that there will be 2 respondents that will be available for each meeting. The person that who's looking for the services can be a valid respondent, and that's basically based on the clinical judgment of the assessor if they can participate fully, answer questions, and give a good idea of what support needs that they are required. So the ADSS is used as the first piece of the application, and it's completed by a trained, certified assessor. And it's, again, like I said, 2 to 4 people to participate, and it usually takes between an hour and a half to 2.5 hours to complete that first application. I'll give you a little bit of information about what's in the application for developmental services and supports. This helps us get to know the people a little better. General information about the referral, any medical conditions, any capabilities and background, which will help us get a better understanding of the person's support needs. Getting to know you, figuring out what the person's likes are, dislikes, dreams, and goals. Reason for the contact and the referral. Information about current circumstances in their lives. Talking about figuring out decision making and guardianship, any physical and sensory support needs, medical needs, caregiver and care concerns, things that make somebody have a good day, things that maybe make somebody have a bad day, things that are important for you to have in place in order for you to have a good day. It's very, very detailed, and a lot of informal conversation, even though the assessor has the template to follow through with. It's like, very informal process of having open dialogue about certain areas within the ADSS. We also talk about things that are important for that person, as well as things that are important, things that other people think are important for that person, which sometimes can be a conflicting view, as we all know. The care concerns is a very big 2 sections for care concerns. So basically what that is that's when if the people in your life have concerns about maybe your medical or behavioral, any behavior diagnosis, I guess. And it talks a lot about how, different levels of, if your son or daughter has medical concerns, like what to what degree, and talk about, like, are they increasing, are they decreasing, what are things that could help to manage this behavior. So again, lots of in-depth. And then as well as the caregiver concerns, which is a big area around the people in your life, the unpaid primary caregivers, and what their needs are, whether they have any mental, any physical, or any medical conditions that impact the way that you're able to care for your son or daughter. So all of that information is taken into the database in order to figure out prioritization. So you'll see that as we go throughout the whole process, that keeping the DSO up to date, for families to keep the DSO up to date, or their Service Navigator up to date, is very important, because that definitely triggers prioritization. And I'll explain how that works. So next is the supports intensity scale. So this document was published by AAIDD, which is the American Association on Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities. And it's, I guess you can say it can have some controversial stigma around it across the province and across North America. It is a really good tool. I think what we need to do is we need to remember that when we're using this tool, it's about, like, let's say if we were talking about John, who's 18 years old and is living in the community of London. When we're taking John and his family through this tool, we're comparing John to a typically functioning John who's 18 years old living in the same city. So the reason why we do that is because we need to have the same standards and same expectations for every single person that we're assessing across the province. So, some questions, like some families will look and say, well, John's never going to work full time. Or let's say we're talking about John, who's 25. John's never going to work full time. Well, most 25-year-old men living in the community of London work full time, because that's what we do, right? The key is that what we need to get across to families is that we're not going to talk about whether John can or can't work full time. What we're going to talk about is, if John did work full time, what kind of help would you, as his supporter or the person that's in his life, have to help him to be successful at working. So that's where we're talking, we're rating what the support is. We're not rating whether he can or can't do it. So John may need a lot of help. So John's going to have a higher score because he needs that more help. Whereas Tim down the road, who's 25, maybe only need a little bit of coaching, whereas John needs full physical supports in order to be successful. So it's a tool that you really have to wrap your head around, and have to really keep bringing families and people right back to it, and talking about, no, it's not about John going to Special Olympics, because in Special Olympics, there's a lot of supports that are already ingrained within that whole system. We're talking about John going to play in a men's baseball league with your neighbor and your cousin. And so again, just trying to get people to wrap their heads around we're looking at the support need, not again whether he can or can't or whether he ever will or won't do these things. AAIDD is in the process, or have just published a second revision of the supports intensity scale. It's going to be starting with the medical and behavioral sections. Every assessor across the province of Ontario will start with the medical and behavioral support sections, which are the last two sections currently in the SIS, in the publicized SIS. Obviously, the reason why they're doing that is because the medical and behavioral supports are something that greatly affects the supports in someone's life. So it was written that way. So some of the sections, like I said, in the SIS, we have home living. So it talks about what the supports John may need living in his home. Could be, it's from areas of using the toilet to preparing food, getting dressed, bathing, taking care of personal hygiene, housekeeping. So those are the home living questions. Community living questions are what do the supports look like in order for John to be able to access his community? Again, not in segregated settings. These are in settings like getting from place to place. So what kind of transportation? Does he rely on, does he use the city bus? Can he call a cab? Things like that. Does he have his license? Participating in recreation and leisure activities, what kind of help does he need in order to participate in those activities? Social interaction, as well as shopping and purchasing goods and services are a couple other examples. Part C is lifelong learning. There's two pieces in the lifelong learning section. The first piece is the formal learning. So if John was to take some kind of continuing education course, a night class, what kind of help would he need in order to make a decision about what class to take? What kind of help would he need in order to interact with people in his class, as well as the professor or the teacher, and as well as using technology for learning. And then the second part is the day-to-day learning, and that's where we all have the opportunity to learn daily skills like problem-solving skills, which is a really big question within the supports intensity scale, because we can't predict and we can't control what happens in our lives daily, whether there's a problem like Heather, who was doing the looking at the first presentation and couldn't get the movies up. Like, there's a problem there that she was not able to predict. So it's about realizing that problem-solving skills pop up all the time, and what kind of help would John need in order for him to manage problem-solving skills every single day, which is usually a really, really big high score, because most people would need ongoing help and daily help in order to be successful there, just because of, again, it's unpredictable. Then the employment, I talked about the working in a competitive 40-hour-a-week position, comparing people to that. Health and safety is around taking medications, avoiding health and safety hazards within your community and at home, learning how to access emergency services, maintaining a nutritious diet is another example. Social activities is socializing within the household, participating in recreation and leisure activities with people, so the social piece of being involved in something with people. Making and keeping friends is another big one. Like, a lot of the times we hear, oh yeah, John has friends. So does John, John's 18, is he on Facebook? Is he on social media? Is he, texting his friends? Is he calling his friends and saying, hey, let's go meet to go to the movies or to the mall? So again, just helping people to realize that it's, bringing them back to, we need to, we're not here to talk about whether he can or can't do these things. If he was to do these things, how would we have to help him? And that again manages the support needs. And then the medical and the behavioral section, lots of areas, we're looking at exceptional medical conditions. We're not looking at the common cold or taking medications. We're talking about using inhalation or oxygen therapy. We're talking about people who may need some tube feeding, people who may need assistance with turning, repositioning as some examples. And then the Behavioral support needs are prevention of assaults or injuries to others. We'll have a deep conversation about rating people as far as what kind of help would they need. Is it something that they need ongoing support every single day and it's pretty intense because it's a big thing in their life? Or is it something that, support staff just need to watch and monitor, and at times they need to help John so that he is successful in not, helping him to prevent assault and injury to others. We have self-injurious behavior, prevention of PICA, prevention of non-aggressive but inappropriate sexual behavior. So again, another big list of questions that we go through. Sometimes the assessors will take more than one meeting to go through with families because it is pretty heavy and pretty deep, and and we want, our job as the assessors are to facilitate the tool. We're not answering the questions. Our job is like, we're the expert on the tool, whereas the families and the person are the expert on what their support needs are and what they know. So our job is to help pull out the information just to make sure that we're getting all the information in order for this to be accurate and reliable. So once the ADSS and the SIS is completed, what we do as an assessor, we do a summary of the ADSS and the SIS, and it's called the Assessor Summary Report. And what that is this is the piece of information that, well, all the information is shared with the family, but this is the piece of information that the families really, I think, find beneficial, because it will illustrate and tell in plain language, give a great summary of the ADSS and the SIS. And it just gives a snapshot of what John may need in order for him to be successful in his life. It's used for matching and linking people to vacancies across the Southwest region and across the province. So it's determined. It's used to determine whether an agency might be able to provide this kind of support that John needs. So they look at the document to figure out, could this be a good match? And if it is, let's meet John and let's figure out if this is a good match for the vacancy that this agency currently has. It also outlines how urgently is the support required, right? Again, which goes in with all prioritization, right? Because if it's something that, somebody's at risk of being homeless, or somebody, a parent is ill and is no longer able to provide care, obviously it's urgent. It needs to happen now, and that's all based on the prioritization. It also is a really good tool that is used to help begin planning for any kind of residential and any kind of respite or any other kind of services that John might need to access in the future. And last but not least, it's also a good tool to help the individual set up their services and supports that they will purchase from an organization. Couple things just about the Service Navigator. So all of our training is provided by the Ministry of Community and Social Services. People who administer the SIS have to go through recertification every 18 months. And again, it's because it needs to be a consistent practice throughout the province. So it's all about the IRQR, which is the inner reliability, to ensure that that we're implementing the SIS the way it was intended and written. So what happens after all that? Like I said before, the Assessor Service Navigator is present still with families, is the main contact for the families at the DSO. DSO will update information for people who are on the waiting list for services and supports. Again, this helps us to make sure that we have current information and current contact information, so that the people who wish to remain on the wait list, it's reliable and accurate information that we have. It also helps us find out if the person's needs or caregiver's needs have changed. So one of the things that we're always telling families on an ongoing basis. If anything changes in your life, if, you know, like let's say if your a parent becomes ill or loses a job or anything that affects the person that has the developmental disability in their home should be reported to the DSO, because there's processes that are in place in order to access funds at a more rapid pace based on priority. I'll give you an example, the ECR, which is the Urgent Response Mechanism. And what it is it's for the Southwest region, actually just for the London Middlesex region, it's a commitment of $510,000 that have been identified to London Middlesex. All the service providers sit at the table with those dollars, and people who need urgent response, urgent supports, come to the DSO. The DSO, we send on the referral to RSA. RSA will send it on to the ECR mechanism, and at that point then a family will get some temporary supports in order to help them to get through this temporary crisis within their life. The key is with the ECR dollars, it's short term, and it's like for a crisis with families. That's what it was implemented and put in place for. Yeah, sorry, Regional Supports Associates, which is run out of the Woodstock General Hospital. So they do, I probably should just touch on this too. So anything, like let's suppose a family comes to us and they don't have a valid assessment or psychological report in order to determine eligibility for their child, or their now adult child. What happens is we, as the DSO, will refer them to RSA, and RSA has a psychologist on staff that will complete the assessment free of charge and no wait lists. At one point there was a very long wait list, but the ministry just recently addressed that, like in the last 8 months.
Just for the psychological assessment?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing, is it was a barrier for families, right? So what, you have to wait in order to figure out even if you're like eligible?
And you can't do it until you're 18, right?
17 and a half, yeah, 17-ish.
Can a parent initiate it, or does it have
Absolutely.
to be sufficient?
Nope, parent can definitely initiate it. Yeah, yeah. So the whole prioritization process. So legislation assigns responsibility for prioritization to future funding entity. Basically, what we do here, the DSO we do not determine priority levels, but we do inform the prioritization process. So with all the information that we're collecting through the ADSS and the CIS and the ASR, we are inputting it into DISCUS, which I'll talk about that in a minute, which is the provincial-wide database to determine prioritization. Obviously, there is a human component to it as well, which there needs to be. We don't want to rely this on, computers. But we have to stress to families and to people that you're in contact with, they have to update the DSO. If we don't know that there's an issue or there's a change in circumstances, when they filled out that application, that's where their priority is sitting. And life changes, we know that. We also get the priority list changes hourly, daily. It can change minutely, every minute, right? Because it's people's lives and things happen and things change, right? So like this morning, or not this morning, but early this afternoon, I had to slip out and I had to approve an ECR. So somebody who needed urgent supports right away because of some family circumstance, right? So it's about informing your assessor and having that open relationship. And most of our assessors here across the whole Southwest region are they have very large caseloads, right? But keep very good record keeping, and again, it's about ongoing dialogue so that the assessors can keep up to date with the way people change and their circumstances change. DISCUS, what I just mentioned, is the Developmental Services Consolidated Information System. It's the database, consistent database across the province, which is hard to believe that prior to 2011, nothing like this ever existed. And like there's a lot of developmental service dollars out there that sit within existing agencies that like it's just not, people weren't accountable, right? So they're working in the right direction as far as trying to have a better grip and a better handle on how developmental services, our dollars are being spent in our communities. And a lot of people, the lack of developmental service dollars too, because there's a lot of people on the wait list. Thank you.